Good morning, everybody. Have you ever thought why our capital is in Washington and not elsewhere? Well, it's quite a story, and it became official on this date in 1790, July 16, when George Washington signed the Residence Act of 1790. During the Revolutionary War, the Continental Congress met here in Philadelphia at what was known as the State House. Today we call it Independence Hall. But as the war progressed, the capital, air quotes, kept moving, partly because of where the British Army was. So all through the war, there was a real question of where the capital would be of the new country, and one factor was the growing division already between North and South. So the Mason-Dixon line, the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland and Virginia, was in a way a border between two distinct parts of the country, and which part would have the capital. Well, the Constitution was ratified in 1789, and the Congress first met in New York. And one of the big decisions that the Congress had to make, here's a federal hall where they met, was where would this new capital be? And this was a big deal, and it fell to the Congress to figure this out because that was what the Constitution said. So Article 1, Section 8 gave the power to set up the capital to Congress, so Congress would pick where it would be and would eventually administer it. And two places that were talked about, one was the Germantown neighborhood of Philadelphia, and then another was Columbia, PA, near Lancaster, but neither was picked. So here's Alexander Hamilton. He was the Secretary of the Treasury, and his vision was for a very strong central government. And one of his ideas was that if the central government took over the debt all the states had during the Revolution, that would solidify the power of the central government. And here's a list of some of the debt that some of the states had, but some states were in more debt than others. And one of the big questions was, what is the role of the federal government when it comes to debt? Now, this chart spells out what federalism is like, and we're all used to this. How much power the states have, how much power the central government has, what powers they share. But this was all very new back then, so was debt something the Fed should do? Well, one night, Jefferson had Hamilton and Madison over for supper, and they talked about where the capital should be, and the decision was, we'll appease the South by having it in Maryland and Virginia, but will appease the North by having the government take over the state debt. So on July 16, 1790, Washington signed what was known as the Residence Act, which set up Washington, D.C. Now, the original plan was for a square, and you'll notice that kind of yellow color in Virginia. That was originally in the district, but it went back to Virginia in 1846, and that's another question for another time. So during the 10 years, the 1790s, the group met in Philly at what was called Congress Hall. This is next to what we know as Independence Hall. And George Washington, who had a background in surveying, here you can see him as a young man surveying, he walked all over that area by the Potomac River to try to figure out the best place for the capital. And a factor had to do with the geologic feature called the fall line. This separates where waters move from waterfalls to still water, so to speak. And Washington wanted it to be at the farthest point of inland navigation, and that was one of the factors. So once they picked the spot, they hired Mr. L'Enfant to design Washington, D.C., and that design is more or less in place today. It's, a little bit different, but it's kind of his vision. And in 1800, as designed, John Adams moved into the White House. There weren't many government buildings there yet. It was mostly mud and yuck, but that changed. So if you're in D.C., go to Georgetown, check out the old stone house built in the 1760s, a reminder of what the area was like before it became the capital.